Hello, this is Kathleen of the World Economic Federation. Today we will be discussing how the work of the World Economic Federation improves the international defense of nations that choose to respect the wishes of the working class and give them a seat at the table. Towards that end, we will be using Ukraine as an example case, but the same concept can be applied to any nation that is under threat from their neighbor. The simple fact is that our political leaders have a very different view of war and conflict than the rest of us, for the most part. At the ground level of Ukraine, for example, it is a tragedy of loss and suffering. It is easy for our leaders to have their scriptwriter string some words together to inspire people and then go back to their lives, comfortable in their own security. They are less concerned with the security of the people. Some have even said that if we make the economy too good, who would defend our nation? To that we say, worthwhile ideas are always worth defending in any economy. Just because for their own comfort they choose to serve themselves, as opposed to the interests of this nation, it does not mean that people would not stand to defend the nation if it was threatened, if it stood for something important beyond the corporate bottom line as judged by Wall Street and hedge funds. To put it simply, people will go to extremes, either to gain comfort and security for themselves and their families, or to protect what they and their corporate donors already have and to acquire more. Not because it serves the Constitution and the people it's supposed to protect, but because it serves their donors, who have little shared interest with the Constitution if it comes at the expense of profits. Or, to put a familiar slogan in a different light, they fight oil wars over there so that they can import the profits back home. The greatest threat to any developing nation's security, and to America's, is the unregulated multinational corporate interest of the fossil fuel economy and its allies in political office everywhere. OPEC Plus wants control of Ukraine's fossil fuel reserves, and some of our fossil fuel-friendly leaders advocate for Russia's claims, not because those claims are legitimate or that it is good for democracy, but because that is what is good for their donors. If that were not the case, then why did conservatives work to complicate union participation in political donations? It was possible to fix the flaws of unions without actively undermining them, so we come to a more logical conclusion. Our leaders marginalize unions because, in terms of systemic infrastructure, the union system is the only thing that can rival corporations and the government's influence on the market. Otherwise, they would have fixed unions, not undermined them. But following Citizens United, corporations have the ability to spend money in many ways in politics without either gaining the consent of or informing their shareholders. Federal law doesn't even allow shareholders to know if and how the corporation is spending money in politics. Unions must disclose their spending and may need to seek consent from members for contributions. Ironically, it's the corporations who can keep their contributions silent that have the louder voice in politics. The power of the silent voice of money makes the problems within the corporations and their influence on politics far more troubling than any problems that arise within the unions. Any institution can have bad actors, but with unions, the fact that they were formed to look out for the interests of the 99% makes those bad actors less able to cause destruction to the democratic system the way that the corporations can when looking out only for the interests of the 1%. Power and accountability are at the core of how systems fail. Capitalism, socialism, and communism are all systems that can work theoretically, but fall apart when the leadership is no longer accountable to the people they are supposed to serve. When and where these systems fail has to do with the centralization of power in unaccountable groups. This is why the auditor system exists in the Federation and has its own voting pool that is independent of the executive committee. In contrast, today in the American government, Inspectors general are appointed by the very leaders they are supposed to regulate. What could possibly go wrong? The democratic governance of the Federation that is answerable to the people is what helps insulate it from the fossil fuel corruption that has captured our political system, directly or indirectly. Right now, Russia is in a bad way. Economically, it is dependent on fossil fuel production. It is as corrupt as our corporations wish our system was, and it is well on its way to population collapse, and its barbaric authoritarian leadership is out of ideas on what to do. So they start a war to secure the border, which includes the control of more fossil fuels. At the same time, the disruption to fossil fuel distribution drives OPEC Plus's profits for Russia's ideological allies that are not under sanctions, while increasing demand, capturing more supply, and further delaying the green changeover. After all, if we are spending another 10 years at war, we are not spending the next 10 years addressing the climate crisis and the needs of humanity. Good for OPEC Plus and Wall Street, bad for the countless people on both sides of the conflict that never had a say in the matter or were lied to get there. Those fossil fuel friends in government who demand all of those government handouts to the fossil fuel industry seek to weaken the United States by ensuring that no nation is independent from OPEC's interests. As such, they seek to interfere with the international aid that is coming to the victims of OPEC and their allies. In this case, to end financial and weapon support for Ukraine by complaining that Biden is taking money overseas. In reality, the hardware gets replaced the next time they run the budget if they want, and the Federal Reserve does not increase interest rates over national defense spending. Notice that they started increasing interest rates for the most part after we removed ourselves from the expensive conflicts after many years of immense national defense spending concurrent with minimal interest rates. But suddenly, when we do some non-defense stimulus, leaders take actions to disrupt supply chains, and the Federal Reserve starts increasing interest rates while the corporations collect windfall profits. What Biden is doing ultimately stimulates our economy as an advanced weapons manufacturing state in a way that does not trigger inflation from the Wall Street-run Federal Reserve. The leaders that say that Biden is sending money over there when he should be giving it here are either ignorant or knowingly misleading their followers for political advantage. These political leaders are working towards the objectives of a foreign authoritarian against the interests of the people in this country, let alone the world. If we care about democracy and the democracy of our allies, it is important that we show unwavering support for our allies' fairly elected leaders, such as Volodymyr Zelensky. In such situations as this, if Ukraine were participating in a mature federation, their citizens would have access to the UBI and health care features during this disrupted time, allowing them to have something to live on, even in times of such hardship. They would also have access to Federation humanitarian services. With those services, they would be able to flee to safety without sacrificing their livelihoods, to await the moment when the infestation of fascists has been cleared out and they can bring their families home again safely. Now that we have the Ukrainian people, hypothetically, safely away from Putin's forces, with the resources to be welcome and thrive where they land, we can talk about how to use the Federation system to rebuild and reinforce international security, which we will do in the next video. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, and comment to join us in this discussion of how to make capitalism pay, like it promised, and protect, which we will discuss how to do.